All right, so let's get started. I'll bring it up now. Hope everyone's doing well. Let's get the presentation up. Carbohydrates, the evil nutrient, who knows when this happened. What do you think, Michelle?
You know, I don't, I've seen a lot of crazy diets over the years, and it's really unfortunate because I feel like the majority of them attack carbohydrates. And I think that that's probably the biggest problem is that you see the same misinformation over and over and over again in lots of different settings.
Yeah. And social media, there's some good stuff, and there's a lot of information. And I get this all the time with a lot of patients. It's like their biggest complaint, I think, is just how much information there is. It's hard to get a straight answer. What should they be eating? And everyone's saying different things. Someone's saying carbohydrates are poison. Some people are saying it's super important. So in today's webinar, really is going over the basics, because when it comes to diet and nutrition, it's rather basic. And I think it's very easy to overcomplicate things. I guess there's a whole industry built on, nutrition in social media. I mean, people have so many things to say about it, and they dissect things, and it makes things overly complicated. So today, we'll break it down simply. We'll talk about carbohydrates. They're honestly not as bad probably as most people think. And we'll talk about the simple versus complex, because that's kind of the most important part, I think. How about you, Michelle? Does that sound about right?
Yep, I am on the same page.
All right. So are all carbs bad? What do we think? I don't think so. And I don't think anything's bad to begin with, right? We're all starting from somewhere. I don't want to view things as bad. I think there's a spectrum of different types of foods, and we can always improve depending on our goals. But I don't really like to say things necessarily bad, because we're all individual and have different goals. So let's get into it. Introduction. So actually, we're going to have a very in-depth webinar today on the organic chemistry and science behind carbohydrates. I hope you all have your notepads, and there can be a test. No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to go too much into the science. But if you all want to sound smart to your friends after this, you can tell them that carbohydrates are also known as saccharides. So a saccharide, scientifically speaking, is a carbohydrate. And there's 4 types of saccharides. And they are mono, di, oligo, and poly, meaning they're basically various length chains of these sugar molecules. And the most common one that most of us have heard of are mono and disaccharides, being glucose, fructose, sucrose, lactose, the typical sugar that we think about. Table sugar, sugar in fruits, the sugar in soda, which can often lead to some issues because it's easy to drink in excess, and that sugar may not be digested as well as other more natural products, which can lead to disease, especially things like we hear, fatty liver now. Fun fact, carbohydrates are your body's preferred and most efficient source of immediate energy. So, they're important for us, especially for athletes or people who are exercising. Carbohydrates are very easy to break down. They're quick. We can use it quickly. We store it and we can break it down, other than, fats take a little bit longer, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Anything to say on that, Michelle? The source of immediate energy?
No, I think you covered it well. I think another interesting thing to note is oftentimes the other time carbohydrates are important is in that afternoon slump. A lot of times you'll really feel that fatigue in the afternoon, especially if you are consuming a lower end of carbohydrates. I think that's something that I hear about often as well, is that, yes, athletes, of course, need them, but everyone else needs them too if you're going to survive the afternoon.
All right. So fiber is interesting because that's a type of carbohydrate, and people don't really realize this. It's not something that we can actually digest and absorb and use as energy, but it actually helps in regulating our bowel movements. It strengthens our immune system, And often fiber can even feed our gut bacteria. And we know that there's a very complex role that gut bacteria plays with our health. And so fiber is important. And often people get it in supplemental form, but fiber can be found, I always recommend fruits and veggies, great sources of fiber, really giving you a diverse amount of nutrients and that special carbohydrate, that fiber. Now, in the people you coach, Michelle, is fiber often something that's brought up and talked about?
It's something that I think a lot of people have heard of, but they don't necessarily understand. And so that is something that I'm finding myself helping people to understand more frequently is, what are my sources of fiber versus what are my sources of more carbohydrate heavy, less fibrous foods.
So carbs as energy. So as I alluded to before, carbs are a very important energy source. And so carbohydrates, essentially, I always tell people, food is essentially two things. It provides us with energy, and it also provides us with, a lot of other nutrients that do important things for our body and body maintenance, rebuilding, recovery, and optimization. But most of what we eat actually gets broken down and utilized as energy. And carbohydrates are really our most efficient energy source. We're able to actually store extra carbs in the form of glycogen. And we store this in our liver, in our muscles. So if you think about it this way, if you're an athlete or you're working out and we're using our body, we're using our muscles, we actually have stores of these long chain carbohydrates and sugars that our muscles can go into right away to get that quick burst. And so it gives us the energy, and it's very important, especially for, athletes that are doing very physical and explosive type movements. But, as opposed to fats, which we've heard of like the keto diet, now fats take a little bit longer to break down, which is why, after we kind of go through our carbohydrate energy storage, we then switch over to fats to then sustain us. And we'll go into that in a little bit. So the carb versus fat. And so again, carb, think of it as an immediate source of energy. But fats, the reason we store a lot of fat on us, our bodies can do that, is because it's very efficient to store, meaning we can store more calories of energy from fat than we can carbohydrate, which is why our body chooses fat to store in large amounts, where carbs is limited to our liver and our muscles. But there's always a trade-off. Anything else on the science behind that? And again, there's some questions here. I'll answer them at the end of the presentation, and please feel free to throw in some more questions along the way. I know someone is saying, although carbs aren't bad, is a low carb, not super low, like keto, more effective than a higher carb diet for weight loss? And again, we'll get into that more at the end, don't worry. So now the exciting part, what we've all been waiting for. We skipped the science stuff. I know it can be boring and tedious, but it's good to know, have a little bit of baseline understanding. I always say when it comes to weight loss, nutrition, health, education is key. So educate yourself, and then you can make decisions based on your own education, not listening to someone else. So carbohydrate categories. There's the simple carbs and the complex carbs. This is what people often hear when people are talking about it. Now, the way I think about simple carbs is like the very Americanized foods, the pastas, the white breads, sodas, even juices, candy, snacks. And what I mean by simple is that food that you're consuming is basically all carbohydrate, which means it's all sugar, and there's not too many other nutrients in that food. And so when I tell people what diet is like a healthy diet is a diet that allows you to get a diverse amount of nutrients. And so you don't want all of your nutrition coming from just one nutrient, because you're missing out on the important fats, the vitamins and minerals, right? The omega-3 fats, omega-6 fats, all the different types of amino acids that make up protein. And then so you're missing out on all of those nutrients that rebuild and maintain our health and can lead to disease if we don't get it. And we're just eating excessive amounts of sugar. And unfortunately, in America, it's kind of most of our diet. And that's where we're seeing all these health problems really stem from. So if we start going away from the simple carbs, right, and start now going towards the complex carbs, which now are foods like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, you're now getting a food that provides you with a lot of carbohydrate, but in addition to that, you're getting the vitamins and minerals and healthy omega-3s and 6s, the healthy fats. You're getting some protein in there. You're getting that diverse amount of nutrients in that one food. So it's a much more efficient way of eating rather than just eating all carbohydrate, a lot of calories, low nutrition, to now a much more nutrient dense way of eating. And a tip, the more color, there usually is on your plate, if it's not Starburst or jelly beans, usually better. So I know people, oh, well, I got a bunch of jelly beans, it must be healthy. No, it's not. You want to do the whole fresh foods. Now we can probably hover on this area for a little bit. Michelle, you want to add to this and kind of say what you've experienced coaching people with the simple and complex?
Yeah, most people, when they work with me, they understand that the obviously processed foods are simple carbohydrates and generally confess that their diet is high in them, or how frequently they eat those foods, or maybe they talk about a desire to cut back on those foods. So you're talking about, the frozen waffles, or different boxes and packages of things, versus the complex carbohydrates. People will like to talk to me about, oh yeah, I just tried quinoa for the first time, or I've swapped out a different carbohydrate for a whole grain variety. And so we talk a little bit about that. But I think there's also some hidden simple carbs that maybe get overlooked, or people think about as being healthier options, when in reality there might be some nutrient density to a coconut sugar or a maple syrup. But in the big scheme of things, those are going to be more like simple carbohydrates in terms of how they affect your blood sugar. And when we talk about fiber, especially, those sugars, no matter how natural they are still not going to provide your body with fiber or the same nutrients that things like fruits and vegetables and whole grains will. So yeah, there might be a little more nutrient density, but I think, again, increasing your awareness, getting that extra level of education about, is this food providing me with additional nutrients, or is it just a highly palatable processed food that of course is very tasty, but if it's, in my opinion, and as a professional, I often say, if it's easy to eat too much of it, it's probably a simple carbohydrate. Versus if you're becoming fuller as you eat it, if it's making you more satiated, or giving you that satisfaction of actually having eaten something, then it's probably a complex carbohydrate. So kind of being able to feel your fullness as you eat it is a good sign that it's a complex carbohydrate.
Yes, great point, because it's so easy to overeat these simple carbohydrates. So easy. I mean, it's like our brain we're designed and have evolved to seek energy, because that's survival. But now in America, we are around so much food and our brain has not caught up and adapted to this. And so once it tastes that, it's like it thinks that we're actually helping ourselves by eating this because we're acquiring this energy, but it doesn't realize that we have almost in infinite amounts of this around us. And that's the real problem with living in the environment, and something we have to actively improve and be aware of. So we kind of talked about this in nutrients and complex carbs. Again, when you're eating complex carbs like the veggies and the fruits, you're getting a lot of nutrition, a lot, as opposed to the white pastas and the breads where it's, again, just sugar. So always be very conscious. I always say, when you eat, ask yourself, am I eating for purpose? Am I taking in all the nutrients I should be getting to support and maintain a healthy body? And so going back to the point where our diets in America are very high on simple carbohydrates, and that's essentially leading to most of the diseases that we have. Type 2 diabetes, it's just growing exponentially. The amount of people that come in, and it's tough. And it's really due mostly to our diets. And yes, there is a genetic predisposition, but we have a lot more control of it than we think. And a lot comes from the diet, a lot comes from physical inactivity. And then you've got, high blood pressure. Many cancers are, to people's surprise, due from what we eat. Over time, this excessive consumption of sugars and likely other additives that come in food can cause constant and chronic inflammatory responses in our body that then leads to, cancer forming, which is, so big problems. Alzheimer's, dementia, strokes, all coming from, how we're eating. So I always say use that as motivation to get healthy, because we can totally avoid that. So again, it's easy to consume excessive amounts of white bread and pasta because our brain is programmed to say, we want more of this. This is actually good. It thinks it's good for us, but we have to learn and be aware that we have to, calm down and not do it so much. And when you do focus on the more complex foods, like Michelle said, you feel a lot fuller because you're taking in so many other nutrients, the protein, the fat, the fiber. It all allows your body to realize that it's full. And weight loss, I mean, again, it's easy to overweight with this. It's easy to gain weight with the simple carbs and that American type way of eating. So kind of slowly switching over. For example, right, let's say we're used to eating white pastas. Something we can do is trying these pasta alternatives that are kind of like whole grain pastas. There's even like lentil pastas. So it's like, maybe making this switch slowly and getting our bodies used to and making new habits to something that's sort of similar, but again, providing us with more nutrition. Any tips on weight loss that you would like to share? Or
No, well, I think it's important to note that weight loss is a result of having a calorie deficit. So when it comes to a low carbohydrate diet, if you're somebody who has a tendency to consistently overeat carbohydrates, yes, it will probably have a pretty significant impact to switch to a low carbohydrate diet. But it's not necessarily because you're on a low carbohydrate diet, it's because it contributes to a significant calorie deficit. So to answer that question about a low carb diet in regards to weight loss, in terms of fat loss, we're just talking about calories. So if cutting down on carbohydrates is going to help you cut down on your calories, then it might be a good fit for you. But it's also going to make a difference just switching out some of those simple carbohydrates for complex carbohydrates, because that is also going to contribute to a calorie deficit because you'll naturally eat less of them. You'll eat smaller portions because you're more satisfied by less of them.
Yep. So tips for incorporating more complex carbs. So whenever patients come in or we help people eating healthy, biggest thing is go slow. Number one, I think that's probably the number one reason why most people fail is because they find like a fad diet that is probably pretty healthy. Like most of these diets are generally healthy and at least relative to what we're currently eating. But the problem is you cannot switch from what you're eating to something brand new and think that you can sustain that, regardless of how healthy it is. It takes time for your body to both physiologically and psychologically adapt to that way of eating. Are there rare people that can do it? Absolutely. But for most of us, like anything we learn, like any skill we obtain, it has to happen over time. So you kind of want to make slow changes to things. And then as you add more habits and your body has time to adjust, you start to transform into a brand new person, really. Your physiology changes, your biology changes, your psychology changes, and you like new things. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Another great tip is try lots of different things, because I think a lot of people have it in their head that they don't like vegetables, when in reality, there's a few vegetables that they've tried and they might not like those, but then there's another handful. And just because something is healthy doesn't mean you have to eat that food. It's a process to try and find the healthy foods that you enjoy eating, because if you enjoy eating them, you're much more likely to do it. So take your time in finding the vegetables or the fibrous complex carbohydrates that you do enjoy eating, rather than forcing yourself to eat foods just because they're healthy.
Well said. Take your time. Stay patient, don't rush, take your time finding things that you like to eat. And yeah, again, don't force yourself. It's very well said. We're not in like a sprint here. Like it's sort of like an adventure, and like people say, a journey. That's really what it is. And we're going to answer the questions soon. So I apologize. Don't worry. I'm going to get to all of them. Don't want anyone to think we're ignoring you. So again, a balanced diet is just something that, when you see your plate, always keep in mind, am I eating with purpose, or am I eating just to eat for pleasure? So, you want to have that balanced plate, right? Optimally. But you start from where you're at and you incorporate slowly. But if there was an optimal way of eating, right? Is there like a protein, a fat, a complex carb? You have all of that in that, for the meal. So optimal health is based on healthy living, dietary changes, physical activity, stress all the time. Get healthy. It's the best thing that anyone can do. Anyone. It will save your life. It really is. And you're going to feel so much better. So, motivate yourself to change, and do change slowly, and get the right help too, because it's very difficult to live in this day and age and do things on your own. We've got jobs, we've got kids, we've got money, we've got, everything. And so now you try to incorporate like the nutrition, the physical activity, it can be overwhelming, and it can cause us to kind of like, become paralyzed and want to give up. So find the help. There's help out there. And invest in yourself, invest in your health. And then over time, again, you will add decades and quality years to your life. So let's get to the question box. Michelle, can you see the questions too? You're able to?
Yes.
All right. So let's start. Although all carbs aren't bad, is a low carb, not super low, like keto, more effective than a higher carb diet for weight loss? Would you like to start off on that one, or?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit when we were back on that weight loss slide, but in terms of there is some level of personal preference, because some people are more satiated by carbs. They love to eat carbs. And to ask that person to cut down on their carbohydrates might actually decrease their compliance to the program. Then on the flip side of that, if you're somebody who naturally eats those processed, simple carbohydrates, you might really benefit from even just a short period of time cutting back on carbohydrates, just to get in the habit of creating a calorie deficit, to get out of the habit of overeating those carbohydrates. So this is another great situation to work with a professional and figure out, okay, where is my starting point right now? Kind of what's holding me back from seeing progress? Where is there room for improvement? Because that's such an individualized thing. The calorie deficit is number one when it comes to fat loss. I think a lot of times carbohydrates are associated with weight loss because, as the word implies, carbohydrate holds water. So when you cut down on carbohydrates, you do have a tendency to see your body weight come down pretty quickly, because some of the water that those carbohydrates were holding on to is released in the process of metabolism. So not to get back into the sciencey stuff, I don't want to go too far into that, but I think a lot of people cut down on carbs because you do see kind of quick results, because it's a combination of not just fat loss, but also water weight loss. So a lot of times carbohydrates are associated with weight loss diets for that reason, but whether or not that's an effective way for you to lose body fat is very individualized.
Yeah, you definitely get that quick weight loss up front because you're getting rid of all your glycogen stores essentially. And like I said, glycogen is stored in your liver, your muscles, but with it carries a lot of water. So people often get that rapid weight loss. And then what happens, and the problem is they lose the weight, they're all excited, but then a few weeks, a month goes by and they start to kind of slow down, and then they become, a bit, discouraged, and they think that there's something wrong, and then that will tend to lead to kind of just giving up. And so it's important for people to understand, like, if you are decreasing your carbs pretty heavily in the front, then yeah, you should expect that, but you shouldn't expect to continue to have that, such a severity degree of weight loss. And I always tell everyone, you really want to aim for like a very moderate amount of weight loss, maybe half a pound a week on average. In addition to that too, I also like to say the weight will come, the weight loss will come as long as you're eating healthy, exercising more, and doing the right things. Everything else will fall into place. Your weight will fall into place, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, everything else. So, weight can be a good metric to make sure that you're doing the right things. But it's not like the only thing I think we need to think about. It's more of like the quality of what we're eating, the amount of what we're eating. All right. As an Italian household, there are always carbs around my bread, pasta, etc. What are acceptable carbs in this Italian household? Thank you. Yeah, so that's a big thing with Italian. I'm part Italian myself. So I get it. We're used to eating the pastas. It's delicious. I mean, it's homemade, all the good stuff. I always say, like, look, you got to live your life too. Appreciate this world and whatever this is, but you can also appreciate more in moderation. So if you're used to eating, heavy amounts of pasta and these carbohydrates, well, just maybe minimize it a little bit, or start adding in more vegetables into the picture. Reduce that amount with, and then add a healthier alternative. Don't completely give it up. Enjoy your Italian Sundays, but you can moderate things and kind of find that nice balance that's appropriate for you. Like, we're not all trying to be fitness influencers and supermodels. Like, we can also live a little bit too. So we got to enjoy life at the same time. Any experience with the Italian heritage, Michelle?
Well, that's my grandma's last name is Bertoli, so we're Italian over here too. And
Yeah, my grandma is De Benedetto.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. That yep, very Italian. So yeah, portion control is a huge component of it. And then rather than thinking about what to cut out, it's not don't worry about cutting out the bread or cutting out the pasta, but what can you add to the meal? So whether you're adding some veggies to a pasta sauce or having some veggies on the side, whether those are cooked or in the form of a salad, you can do a lot by adding to the meal rather than worrying about what to take away from. You don't want to lose those traditions, right? Being Italian is part of who you are. So rather than trying to cut out the traditions that are important to you and your household, what can you add to them?
Love it. What is the healthiest sweetener for coffee? I've been switching between sugar in the raw and maple syrup, but low amounts. Prefer no artificial sweeteners. Do you have any experience with that?
Well, I do have some options for you to try. I think a low amount of either of those sugars is fine, first and foremost. Again, it's not about cutting out every simple sugar that you consume. So again, they're tasty. We got to live a little. So if that's really important to you and you need your coffee to taste exactly the way that it does right now, I think a small amount of either of those sugars is just fine. But if you are interested in trying other options, you can look into monk fruit sweetener is one that's really popular right now. It has less of an effect on your blood sugar. Or stevia, which is not an artificial sugar, but it's a natural plant-based sugar-free alternative.
Yep. And again, like, if you are used to taking a certain amount of sugar with your coffee, I don't just say cold turkey it, because you're not going to last long. Like, you're going to be like, first of all, you can do it for a few weeks and make this disgusting, and you start pouring your Dunkin', whatever it is, back into there. I get every patient's like, yeah, we get the caramel from Dunkin' Donuts. You get all the tasty stuff. So again, start slow. If you're getting a lot of caramel in there or whatever additive, then maybe try a little bit less and start going at it like that, because you just can't cut it all out at once. But as you kind of get there, maybe you start reducing the amount, you can start switching to healthier, sugars like Michelle just mentioned. Biggest takeaway and theme is like, just go slow with anything. It's like you kind of taper off whatever it is, you just, slowly. I found it interesting that potato bread is a complex carbohydrate. I guess it depends. An easy switch from white to potato bread. Maybe I'm wrong. Isn't potato bread usually white bread, or I don't know. What is potato bread? I haven't had that in a long time. I know it was good.
Yeah, it is delicious. I would need to see an ingredient label or, a nutrition panel to know exactly which type of potato bread there. But yeah, generally speaking, there are maybe some more nutrients because potatoes do have some vitamins and minerals, but there's like this spectrum, right, of white bread to, that whole grain seeded sprouted bread. And maybe you're starting here at white bread and gradually switching to a potato bread, to a whole wheat bread, to, sourdough or whatever falls in that spectrum.
Yeah, but I don't know if there's potatoes in bread. I think it's just like a term. I've never heard of potato being an ingredient in bread, but I would have to look it up. I feel like that's just white bread.
I think it's made out of potato starch. I think
okay, the starch.
Thinking of the same thing.
Gotcha. All right, yeah. So, you work your way kind of down. Bread's like a whole topic in itself. I mean, we love bread in America, and I think that's a big thing that most people, we can start to kind of get better right away, and that will make things, a lot for blood sugar, everything. You kind of start eliminating and reducing the bread, and then switching it with better quality breads. Is there a time of day that you recommend eating most of your daily carbs? I don't know. When you start getting to, like, I think more like the athletic level, like if you are participating in a sport, it's probably more important. I think for most of us, I'm not sure. What's your opinion on that, Michelle?
Yeah, I always like to go back to you've talked a lot about purpose, right? Eating with purpose. And carbohydrates provide us with energy. So I do typically like to remind clients of that purpose, but different people need energy at different times of day. And we do even need energy when we sleep. So you don't need to slam a bunch of carbohydrates and then go to bed. But carbohydrates also help us with many different functions. So I would say listen to your body. I know that's a very vague recommendation, but when it comes to when do you feel like you need the most energy throughout your day, generally speaking, the meal before that would be a good time of day to have carbohydrates so that you're thinking and performing at your best during the time of day where you need the most energy.
Yes. All right. So here's a good question. I think most people are going to appreciate. What is your advice on intermittent fasting? Again, I think there's likely health benefits to maybe not eating for periods of time. But again, I think the bigger thing is like, it may be a healthy eating pattern, but for most people to now, again, look at how most of us eat. If you're eating most meals throughout the day, you're eating in high quantities, and then you say, I'm just going to do intermittent fasting, you're not going to survive it. It's not going to be sustainable. This is like the biggest thing I see. Everyone tries intermittent fasting, and most people end up going back to their old way because their body could not sustain that period for not eating amount of time. Now, I think for some people, it can be beneficial if you're having difficulty losing weight. We've had patients before with difficulty losing weight, and then you now increase the amount of time throughout the day that they're not eating. That results in eating less calories throughout the day. That's really how it works for the most part. It's nothing magic about it. For the most, I think the biggest effect on intermittent fasting is it causes people to eat less, without having to kind of think. It's like, I'm just not going to eat from this period of time. And then you eat in that remaining of time, and it kind of just, without having to log foods and do everything, by the book, you just will automatically eat less because you have less time to eat. What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, it's an extra tool for the toolbox, but it's certainly not necessary for everyone. It's just another layer for somebody who feels stuck. You know, if you've kind of tried some other things, it's another tool for the toolbox.
Exactly. But I don't recommend that for people who are like looking to get healthy and lose weight like right away. I think we got to slowly kind of ease our way into it. And like first, like let's fix up how you're eating a little bit, the times you're eating. And then likely you won't ever really need to do intermittent fasting. You'll find just by, eating the way you're eating, but in a healthier eating pattern, that's going to be enough. But personally, I mean, my personal story is, so I was actually having some like long COVID type stuff. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Let me try to do whatever I need to do. And I didn't eat for 3 days, which people would think is crazy, but like, we don't need to eat that much. We think we have to eat all the time. You don't. You really don't. Our body can survive a very long time without actually eating food. Water is another story. You have to drink water, but food, we can survive a very long time. Your body breaks down fats and it uses the fat that we have stored as energy in the form of ketones. And that's another presentation in itself. But anyway, since then, I'm like, all right, you realize you really don't need to eat that much. We overeat in America without kind of realizing it's this culture. And now like I can go the whole day without eating and be fine, but I don't recommend that because it takes a long time to get there. And for me, it works. For some people, and for most people in their schedules, it may not work. And again, it comes down to what works for you. But I would recommend against going right into intermittent fasting, like when you're on that initial journey to getting healthy. What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you eat throughout the day?
I do eat throughout. I am one of
so give your perspective. That's excellent because that's how you do things. And this is a great example for people to see. Like people have all different ways of doing things.
And I'm actually on the flip side of the schedule. If I was going to intermittent fast, I wake up starving every day and I eat within minutes after getting out of bed. But if it wasn't for cooking for another person in my household, I would skip dinner most of the time. It's just I'm not as hungry at that time of day. So it would be easier for me to skip dinner and then fast until the next morning. So it goes back to everything is so individual. And there's potentially a time and a place to apply different things, but it's not the first option for most people.
Yep. A perfect example of how everything is different. So you're going to have so many different types of diets. People say eat like this, but realize right away, like everyone's different. There's not a one size fits all way of going about it. All right. I love wine and other adult beverages. What's a healthier brand or the best choice? I don't know. I'm not sure if I don't really do much drinking anymore. Those days are long past. How about you, Michelle? You a big drinker?
I am not heavy. I'm like a kombucha, a kombucha drinker. No, but in terms of adult beverages, moderation, we've talked about that a lot, right? So the amount that you're drinking, I think, is probably more important than what you're drinking. At least that would be my own advice to you. Also how frequently you're drinking. There's a lot of research that shows that the amount consumed is what has the biggest impact on your health. And that's really what it comes down to. If I was going to give you like a healthy-ish option, things like red wine do have some, nutritional benefits, but is it enough to say, yes, you should drink red wine? No, I'm not going to tell you that.
But it makes a great headline, and now everyone wants to drink red wine.
It has, that is for sure.
It has resveratrol, and it sounds very fancy. Sounds like a very important nutrient. Now it's a superfood, right? This is how everything gets spread around the news and social media. So you say one fancy sounding nutrient and now it's like the best thing in the world and everyone has an excuse to now drink. But yeah, well said. It's about quantity, really. Look, moderation, but everyone has their life. So figure out if you want to drink all the time and you're okay with the consequences or trade-offs of that, do whatever you want to do, but there's always trade-offs and consequences. So really moderation is best, and it's really the amount.
Yes.
And I think, you know, when you drink that, it's like get good, you know, enjoy what you're drinking, you know, just don't do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Um,
great, again, you gotta live a little.
but then there are recommendations, like if you do go out and you want to get like a lower calorie drink, like a vodka and, you know, seltzer is like a lower cal drink than
Right.
I think like a margarita. So you can start thinking
Yeah.
like that too.
Well, then it comes back to simple carbohydrates. So if you're drinking something that, pina coladas and things that are very sugary, now we're not just having the alcohol content, but we're having all of the additional simple carbohydrates that come along in that beverage. So just again, something to educate yourself about, something to be aware of, and then you can make your own choices.
Yeah, and then, you know, space it out too. Have like a seltzer or water between drinks if you're out at a party or something. You know, I know it's a social aspect too. It's comfortable. You have something to drink on, so, you know, add that in there. Great job. Thank you very much. You too. Stevia, stevia. All right, you like stevia or stevia, Michelle? Right? You mentioned that before.
Yeah, it's funny. I just this afternoon I made a cup of tea and I like to add a little sweetener in it. And for me, it works well in warm foods, in my opinion. But when you try and add it to iced things, it's not as good. Again, my own personal preference, but yeah, that's my sweetener of choice for the most part.
Comes from a plant, right? Derived from
Yeah,
a. Okay, I don't think I've ever really had it. Some people. What was that?
it's a leaf.
A leaf. All right. Yeah, I don't think I've really had it. Some people really don't like the taste. Like I think for some people, whatever it is, it has a very bad taste. Um,
Yeah.
but again, if you're coming from, you know, it could be a nice alternative to add in there. You know, if you are, you know, want to switch from sugar or whatever. What are your thoughts on oatmeal for breakfast? I think it's a healthy option. The thing is, like with most things, when it comes to like the labeling and the marketing and the types and the brands, you can get oatmeal, but the oatmeal can literally be like candy. Like you can have super high amounts of sugar. You can have tons of like artificial whatever in there, a bunch of additives that could be detrimental to your health. So it's like finding a healthier oatmeal. You know, a lot of sugar in a lot of these packaged oatmeals. So maybe look for something that's just really oats. I like steel cut oats, but it's actually, you have to kind of prepare that. Maybe it takes about 20 minutes on the stove. You can do like just like the flattened oats that you can microwave with some water in it. So I would recommend getting some like just regular oatmeal and then putting some fruit or something on top, putting some like peanut butter or nut butter in there, almond butter, whatever you like. Maybe to sweeten it up again because you're going from where you're at, doing some maple syrup, maybe some honey, things like that. That's kind of how I think. Again, I would have to understand more of where you're starting at, and then you kind of, you know, work from there. How you feel oatmeal? You an oatmeal eater?
I do love oatmeal. Um, the I do something very similar. I actually add a scoop of protein powder to mine, which is not necessarily something that I would recommend to everybody, just because again, some people are very adverse to the flavor of protein powder. But I do like to kind of, like you were saying, balance out that meal by adding a little bit of fat or adding a little bit of protein to it, because we've got those nice complex carbohydrates. But when we're talking about fully balanced meals, making sure that there's a little bit of protein in that meal is something that I also like to emphasize. So
Yep.
yeah, I love oatmeal.
All right. Postmenopausal. That's always a thing I do see in women who are postmenopausal. They tend to keep on weight, you know, a lot more. It's more difficult to lose weight. And that is certainly part of it, which is also why I like to say health isn't always just about weight loss. Sometimes in life, hormones can affect it, and you want to focus on your lifestyle. And whatever weight you are, you know, you kind of accept it, and you may want to improve it, use it as a marker. But it can be difficult as we age, but not impossible. Again, because we don't really realize how we're eating, what we're doing, and just by making simple changes can make us realize, even though we're postmenopausal, we can actually get in really good shape. Like there's a lot that we can still do. It's not just, you know, left up to our genes. Any experience in that area, Michelle? Dealing
You know,
with women of that, because a lot of women come into me, you know, with that complaint.
yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of the women that I've worked with and that I have worked with in the past are kind of in that age range and start working with me because they're frustrated by the fact that they've gained weight and now they can't get it off and they feel like they're doing everything. And it's really slow. But like you mentioned earlier, slow is not necessarily bad. Half a pound to a pound a week. And I know sometimes with postmenopausal women, it can be even slower than that. But rather than focusing on the weight itself, even though that can be frustrating, choosing lifestyle, making choices based on your lifestyle, that's just like an overall healthy, we have to remember that the choices affect more than just our weight. So we're avoiding disease, we're causing our cells to function better. You know, there's so many things that go into nutrition beyond just our weight. And I know it's so easy to focus on that. And it can be really frustrating when this weight gain is new. It's not something that you've lived with your whole life. But really trying to focus on making choices that benefit your overall health, not just your weight, can be less frustrating.
All right, a lot of questions here on sourdough bread. I don't think that people can see the question. Can everyone see this question answer? Because it's funny, there's a few in the row. I don't know. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe that you can see it. Sorry. Sourdough bread. I like sourdough bread. I mean, I think it's considered a whole grain, actually. I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's some other nutritional benefit to sourdough bread. Again, if it's legit sourdough bread, if it's like homemade, that's the good stuff. Right? If it's kind of not so much added sugars and whatever preservatives that tend to be in the marketed sourdough breads at the supermarket. So you always want to be careful when you're shopping. Something can say healthy, sourdough bread. This is the healthiest food in the world. You can write whatever you want on the food, but where you have to actually look is on the back on the nutrition panel area and look at the ingredients. You can't lie about that. So learn how to read ingredients, and then that's going to be key. 647 bread is good low carb. I don't know that bread. I've never had it, but it sounds good. Have you ever had that one, Michelle?
I'm not familiar with that one either.
All right. I'll look into that one. I'll put a reminder in. Yeah, because it's really, you want to find like the best way. You find some good brands that you like and kind of stick with it. Then it becomes very easy. There's only a few brands. There's so many food. It's too much food around us these days. It's too many brands. It's a whole ridiculous industry. It's calm down with all the brands. Fasting is awesome. What are your thoughts on honey? Yeah, I mean, I like honey. Maybe there's, like you said, some other nutritional benefits. Now, again, it's mostly sugar. So anything in excess, especially this, it's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's like the unhealthier simple carb, but it's mostly sugar. But there are, perhaps some health benefits to it. I know even it has antiviral properties, antibacterial properties. People use it for things like that, and some good, solid natural sweetener. I would say you don't have to worry about anything. I like it. I don't know. I think it's pretty safe. A certain brand of protein powder you recommend? I like the company Garden of Life. I trust. They source good ingredients. They said it's grass-fed, grass-finished from the cows, which is important. You want the cows to be eating the grass and kind of staying away from the grains, because it is the diet that makes up the cow that then you will consume. So if you can maybe find like a grass-fed, grass-finished whey protein, that would be good. And what are your go-tos for that, Michelle? You mentioned you put protein powder in the oatmeal.
Yeah, I use a plant-based protein. It just seems to sit a little better in my system. And because I do add it mostly to my oatmeal, or I mix it up, and one of the things that I really like to make are little energy balls, is what I call them. But they're like oatmeal and protein powder and peanut butter. And there's something that I eat like right before a workout or first thing in the morning. So I don't really drink protein powder just as a protein shake, just to preface my answer, because the plant-based proteins are typically a little bit different in terms of texture. They can be a little grainy, but I really like, there's the plant-based protein by the brand Orgain. And they have, again, high quality ingredients. I trust that what they say is in there, because that's another thing that you have to be aware of when it comes to supplementation. It's also convenient. So that's something that we didn't really talk about tonight, but oftentimes simple carbohydrates are more convenient than complex carbohydrates. We can get them anywhere, but if you look for complex carbohydrates, you can find them a lot of places too. So when it comes to my protein powder, I like that I can order the Orgain. If I'm in Target, they sell it there. If I'm in Trader Joe's, they sell it there. I can order it online and have it shipped to my house. So the convenience factor and the consistency that I get the same product no matter where I go is part of why I choose that one too.
Perfect. You find a brand that you like and you stick with it.
You stick with it. Yep.
Best fruits and which to avoid. I mean, as far as fruits go, whatever fruit you like. I mean, fruit is good. Where people get tricky is when they're like, yeah, I eat lots of fruit. I eat the dried fruit. And it's good. It can be a healthy alternative, but again, when you start eating a lot of it, it becomes like candy. I know from experience, I'm a big dry mango guy. And it's basically just like a fruit roll up, because you can imagine you have the whole fruit and it's hydrated, right? It has a lot of water content in there. And with it, you have a lot of other nutrition. And you can't eat more than one mango. You can't eat more than one apple. You can't eat more than one plum, but you dehydrate it and turn it into a dried fruit, and you can eat a whole bag. And that is, it's not really that healthy. It's not, just because it's fruit. So I would say any whole fruit that you enjoy. Again, be careful too with like the smoothies, because you can pour a lot of fruit into a smoothie and then take too much in excess, because it's easier when it's all chopped up. So when you eat fruits, try to eat the whole kind. But when you do put into a smoothie, just watch the amount that you put in. Think about like, could I eat this like in one sitting, or is this like too much? But I'm a fan of most fruits. I don't really think there's anything bad unless you have like specific allergies to them, not that I'm aware of.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with every piece of that.
All right. Yeah, and for workout purposes, for the fruits, I mean, again, hand in hand. It's a great carbohydrate. It's a great source of carbohydrate, and you get your vitamins and minerals in there. They have other flavonoids, all other important nutrients. Legion protein is really good. I'm not aware of that. That sounds pretty cool. So that excellent. We appreciate the comment. I'm happy that you found the presentation fantastic and helpful. I hope everyone did find it helpful. Hopefully we'll do more of these. We'll have some more interesting conversations. There's so much in the world of diet, nutrition, and health that it's between the amount of foods there are available in the supermarket, the amount of content online, it's absolutely ridiculous. Literally, it's just keep it simple, basic, like less is a lot more, and just kind of have more of a minimalistic mindset, and you'll be okay. And then take things slow. Any last presentational words?
No, I think we've covered it. Again, going back to, we're here for this information for you guys, and I am so grateful to have been part of it. I'm excited to be part of this team and to bring more content like this to you guys. I love that at least a few of you found it to be helpful. And I think just mentioning that if you do need help with implementing any of this, please reach out. Like, my goal as part of this team is to make sure that you guys are actually getting help and that you're getting what you need. So if you have additional questions that come up, please feel free to send them our way, and Dr. Abend can send them my way.
Absolutely. Email me, come to my office, call the office. I mean, literally my mission and purpose is to help people get healthy. It's just like, by doing the right things, doing it the right way, and stopping all this this weight loss cycle, fad stuff, and just like, living, because we have so much potential as humans. It's just finding the right help and resources to kind of get you there. And I always say, like, invest in your health, invest in it. It's the best investment you will ever make. So with that said, I won't keep you guys for longer. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed. We will have more of this because it seems to be seems to be somewhat successful. People enjoyed it and they came, so that's all good. All right, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you. And thank you so much for great questions. Really great discussion. It was awesome to have you guys participate and get what you needed out of this event.
We'll see you in the next one. Stay healthy.
Bye, guys.